Yes, well, Araya mentioned it, and so did Miss Morning just now. Well, it's been many years since we devised it and added the magic. I think I can find it. Once we're in, we'll have a few encounters if the guards are still around, I imagine. You and I will freeze them up or some such thing. Then we'll steal the palace, so that if Justine makes it out of Arteme, she'll have lost her power, so to speak. The palace is her power? Mr. Today furrowed his brow. Not exactly. Her power is the fear she instills in people. She hides behind the palace so that Quill can't see that she is afraid too. What is she afraid of? The Madge laughed bitterly. She's afraid of losing her power to make people afraid. She's afraid of not being in control, appearing weak. Alex thought about all this. It was hard to imagine that the stately woman was afraid of anything. But there was another question in his mind that had been eating away at him since the night he'd gone to the gate. He hesitated, not sure if he should ask, but finally gathered up the nerve as they sped along, rounding a particularly jutting piece of the island. Mr. Today? Yes, lad. You said that you made the people of Quill forget. Mr. Today nodded thoughtfully. Yes, I did that. Why? He scratched his chin. To keep them from dissenting when Justine began to rule. Because back then I believed in Justine's plan when she took the title of High Priest, that the best way to rule people was to protect them from everything and frighten them into obedience. I believed in it so much that I gave my full trusting to Justine for years and didn't always notice what she was up to. And because of that failure on my part, she came up with the plan to segregate the least useful in our society. I offered my services because I was a better mage than she. It wasn't difficult to render them useless. I just had to put the unwanteds in a splatter paint spell, or paralyze them, or make them fall asleep. Then let them stand around on the lawn outside the walls of Quill. No mess. He shook his head sadly, horrified at his own actions, as tears glistened and seeped into the wrinkles around his eyes. But then Justine wanted to go a step further, a step too far, in my opinion, at the time. She convinced me to create the great lake of boiling oil, and then she proceeded to eliminate the unwanteds permanently. I was horrified, but I didn't let on. She was so powerful and power hungry by then that she wouldn't have hesitated to eliminate me if I defied her. And I knew I had to stop her. So I pretended to be behind her actions fully, and I offered to take over the business of dumping all the remaining bodies, which allowed Justine to have more time to do the rest of her job. He sighed. So I hid them using magic, and every year froze and hid the newest group that had been purged. What? Alex bit his lip. What made you decide to make Arteme? Well, there was a little girl, he said softly. You see, Alex, you have to understand how it all started. 50 years ago, when I was young, just a little older than you, and I was foolish. I went along with Justine disappearing every purge day to put spells on the unwanteds. By the time Justine wanted to actually eliminate them entirely, I had a wife, a child, some dear friends in the government, one especially. And each year, once I took over, I pretended to eliminate the unwanteds, but merely did, as I'd done before, casting spells on them and then hiding them with another spell so Justine couldn't see. But it became hard to cast these spells on children I had grown to care about. One little girl in particular, and I knew it was wrong. All of it was so wrong. I decided that if I were to change things and be a better man, I had to release them from these spells and let them live their lives. I had to create a secret haven for them, but I couldn't just create it and then leave them. So I did what I had to do. I left my life, my friends, my family in Quill and created Arteme. And I sold the idea to Justine as a way to build even more fear in the hearts of the children and scare them into submission. I would hermit myself away and become the dreaded death farmer that no one actually saw unless they were unwanted. Wow, Alex said, and took it all in. After a moment, he looked up at the Madge. So originally you chose power like Justine back when you were young, but then you changed? He said. You became good? So maybe Aaron. Mr. Today smiled. We will never lose hope, my boy. Alex puzzled for a long moment, gazing over the water. Uh, were you, were you secretly in love with Justine or something? Is that why you went along with her? Mr. Today afforded a chuckle. No, Alex, not in the slightest. Not any more than you could be secretly in love with your twin. Wait a minute, what? Alex stared at the mage. Wait, you mean? The old man nodded sagely. You and I, he murmured, have a lot in common. So Mr. Today is the twin of Justine? That's different. Didn't see that one coming. They closed in on the south side of the island, where the ground grew hilly. Alex thought that they were probably near the palace, but not a thing could be seen of Quill because of the hideous wall. Who was that little girl? Alex asked presently, although he thought he knew. My daughter, Claire, Miss Morning. Alex nodded. You couldn't cast the spell. No. Mr. Today looked away, a wistful expression on his face. And so you created Arteme for her? Mr. Today nodded as he pulled the yacht closer to the shore and cut the motor. And for all of you, best thing I've ever done. Still, it's not enough to make up for all the wrongs, he said. Whatever I do, it'll never be enough. He scanned the rocks, muttering something to himself as he searched to remember the exact location of the magical passage. Aha, he whispered. Simber landed gracefully on the rocks next to the boat. Mr. Today placed the anchor spell while Alex climbed over the side of the craft, and the two, embarked onto Simber's back for the short journey to Dry Island. Once they reached the shore, Mr. Today put his hand on the wall and recited an incantation. A great chunk of the concrete block slid aside, and the three walked through it. They found themselves in a dark, narrow, enclosed room. Mr. Today recited a second incantation, and the wall in front of them crumbled to dust. They stepped over it and looked around the dimly lit passageway. Everything was gray, just like Olive Quill. The ceilings were very high, the hallway just wide enough for Simber to walk through without scraping his wings on the walls. "Be ready," Mr. Today whispered in the echoing chamber. "There will be 6 guards, but they'll most likely be stationed at the entrance." Alex fingered his pens and balls of clay inside his vest pocket. They moved slowly into the heart of the palace. First Simber, then Mr. Today, and then Alex bringing up the rear. They passed doorways on the left and the right. Simber sampling the air, his ears tuned and twitching this way and that. After a moment he stopped short and pointed with a long, sharp claw.